Welcome to the Indie Horror Junkie podcast. Tonight, you will be joining Rotting Ricky and Asylum Amy as they play host to some of the true movers and shakers in the indie horror scene. So lock your doors, check under the bed, and get comfortable, because here we go.
And I'm Sylvia Saska, and we're the Saska Sisters. And this is Indie Horror Junkie! Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
We're a panic attack!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Woo! Indie Horror Junkies!
Indie Horror Junkie! Indie Horror Junkie!
How do?
Good evening, Junkies. How you doing, Running Ricky?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm doing good. Episode 79, you guys, of the Indie Horror Junkie podcast. And every Wednesday when I do that intro, I am reminding myself that we have new photos to update from all of our events of the past year. And then I do need to update that intro to the podcast. But we have so much going on. We have been literally hitting the ground running since the beginning of the year. So we're triaging everything coming in, but I got to get that to the top of the list. Anyways, we have a really fun show for you guys tonight. We have writer, director, producer, and screenwriter Olen Ray on the show. We're going to get to him in a few minutes because we have a lot of Indie Horror Junkie news to go over. Like I said, it's been a whirlwind. We've been nonstop since MegaCon. And speaking of MegaCon, our submissions for the Indie Horror Junkie Film Festival for 2025, March of 2025, have already been in the process. So our submissions are open. If you have an Indie Horror Junkie short film or feature film, make sure that you submit. We also have the ScareCon Film Festival, which is a new partnership between Indie Horror Junkie and ScareCon, which is in Syracuse, New York. Submissions are open here as well, you guys, September 5th through the 7th at ScareCon. You're going to see a lot of familiar faces there. You're going to see the Junkies. You're stuck with Rick and I all weekend. We have some special guest announcements already rolling in. Felissa Rose, Dave Sheridan, Daniel Roebuck. We're going to have the guys and gals from Fuzz on the Lens, who you know from the Terrifier and Stream and Screamboat franchise, which is our next news that we're going to be getting into. Some of our biggest news, actually, for the day. But as far as the film festivals, head over to Film Freeway and make sure that you submit before those prices go up. But Screamboat, you guys, today's the day. We know and love them from coming to our film festival at MegaCon this past February. We had a special fan screening for their indie horror comedy feature film that stars David Howard Thornton, who you know and love from the Terrifier franchise and also from Stream. So he plays a murderous mouse. And officially today, Screamboat is available in select theaters nationwide between now and Sunday. So it's really important that we get out and support indie horror. Get your tickets, get your butts in those seats, because this is how we can support directly. If they get enough ticket sales, because they're independent, they're not backed by a studio, they have a better chance of getting an extended release in theaters. We want to see that happen for them. This is such a fun movie. I can't elaborate enough. I'm not just saying it because I love these guys. I'm saying it as a filmmaker. Rick can tell you he's seen it. It's just such a fun movie. Rick and I are going to be showing up and showing out with our people between Tampa and Orlando, 2 theaters, one night this Saturday, April the 5th. Our buddy and fellow junkie, Ellen Ray, is going to join me in Orlando at Disney Springs. That is at the AMC Dine-In Disney Springs 24. So you can head online and get your tickets for that showing at 9 o'clock. And then old Rotting Ricky is going to be in Tampa, and his theater is at AMC Veterans 24 in Tampa, also the 9 p.m. screening. So if you guys are in the Tampa, Orlando area, please come hang out with us, support this. We have magazines from Indie Horror Junkie that we're going to be giving away. We have tons of posters and signed posters. Screenboat. Stephen the Morte, the writer, director, producer of this incredible film, signed a ton of them, shipped them here. We've got plenty to hand out, so please come so we can give those to you. Let's all support this film. Speaking of Screenboat, issue number 15 of Indie Horror Junkie, we have Amy Schumacher La Morte holding that beautiful 2-year anniversary magazine for us. She is our indie horror hottie in this issue. She was actually at Scarecrows, which is one of our favorite Halloween stores, who carries our physical copies of the magazine. So shout outs to Scarecrows, Chris at Scarecrows, Amy Schumacher La Morte. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting us. We want to support you, and we're, again, excited to see you in theaters. Everybody get out and support. What else did we got? We got The Clock available on all kinds of streaming platforms. Officially today, you said...
today. It's available on DVD from Amazon.
Okay, on DVD from Amazon.
Blu-ray from Amazon, yes.
Blu-ray on Amazon, and then Tubi, Amazon, Vudu, Plex, Chilling. Check it out, you guys. It's a fun film. Brick's the writer and director on this. You're stuck seeing my mug in it because I'm in it as well. So, but it's a fun film. A little bit behind it. It was almost like I don't even know how to describe it. Almost like a challenge. We filmed it in 5 days in a haunted house. Micro budget, but we did it. It's fun. So see what you can do with the micro budget. That's going to be the tone of our show tonight as well. We're going to get into that. And speaking of my face, you're going to see it again in May, New Jersey, at New Jersey Horror Con. So make sure you guys go to New Jersey Horror Con Facebook, Instagram, and check out all of the guests that they have. They have an amazing lineup. It's going to be at the Showboat Hotel, and that's in Atlantic City. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I was just at New Jersey Horror Con, but not this location. So keep an eye out for the rest of the guest announcements. That's going to be May 17th through the 18th. They also have a film festival. So if you want to submit to them, go ahead. I'll be there. We submitted one of our films. We'll see how it does. Might be submitting a second film if we can get it done. But it's going to be a really great turnout over there. The fans and the horror fans in New Jersey, they're just in a league of their own. So I'm excited to see you guys. Come out and get your Indie Horror Junkie magazines. It's going to be a good time. How can it not be?
Absolutely.
One more shout out to Screenboat. We want to see what they did and show you guys all the hype that was behind this film to get you excited, to get your butts in theaters. This is our fan film kind of hype video that was captured at MegaCon Orlando when we had the seats filled. Almost 300 people filled the room at our theater at MegaCon Orlando. So let's go ahead and give them one more shout out. You guys show up and show out for this film this week in theaters, and then we're going to bring on our guests. We're going to see Fred here in just a minute.
All right, here we go.
So freaking awesome.
We are here at MegaCon Orlando for the early fan screening of Screenboat. The building is full and everyone's hyped. Who's ready to see Screenboat at MegaCon Orlando?
Thank you all so much for being here. Please enjoy Screamboat.
Screenboat is hilarious.
Iconic.
Phenomenal.
Magical.
Intense.
Maybe the bloodiest scene I've ever seen.
Steamboat wins.
The Disney references were fantastic.
You're gonna laugh. You're gonna be grossed out. Don't miss out on this.
I was locked in the whole time.
I want to go see it again right now.
That was amazing. Be sure to check out Screenboat in theaters on April the 2nd.
Don't be a pussy. Go see it.
Hey, how you doing, Fred?
Great.
What do you think of that trailer, Fred?
Wild. I think I've seen it before.
Oh, really?
It really is fun, you guys. It's such a fun film. The practical special effects that they pull off, Hi Mary, are so over the top. It's hard to make them an original, but somehow they, Hi Jared, made it happen. And there's just a lot of hype and love and support behind this. We're indie horror filmmakers. And so to see people out here doing what everyone wants to see done in the indie realm with, unrated, non-studio backed films. It makes it feel tangible for everybody else who's really hustling in the industry. So I gotta, hats off to them for getting it done and getting this far. It's pretty impressive, and they're very talented, and I'm excited for them and wish them all the best. But enough of that. How are you, Fred, Olen Ray? Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Thanks for having me.
And I feel like you're the perfect person to talk about independent films and low budget films. And that's really, you're a great example of what that represents. And you kind of have a reputation for those type of films and being a mentor in the industry. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in filmmaking.
Well, I got started right here in Florida, and I made my first films in Orlando and the Oviedo area.
Oviedo.
It wasn't it was the Oviedo of 1978, which was a swampy area.
Lots of lakes.
Nobody lived in. It was a rural area back then. I left that area in 1981 to go to California to see if I could do something there. And I didn't come back for 50 years. I moved back and I bought a house right back in the same area I grew up in, the Sarasota, Bradenton area.
Oh, no way. Okay, so you're just south of Tampa. Very cool.
Yes, and it's all different.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of old Florida here, if you look for it. But
it is. A big siesta key, man.
So changed, but there's areas of it here though that really remind me of back in those days. But I started out in Orlando. I made a couple features there, The Alien Dead and The Brain Leeches. And but it was right when Universal was starting to build, and everybody said, "Fred, don't leave. Filmmaking's coming to Florida." And I said, "You know what? I don't have time to waste." And I packed up my car. I didn't have any money. My brother and I, we had less than $1,000 in cash. I mean, we had under $1,000. I mean, in real money. I mean, we had no credit cards either. I mean, we didn't have anything. And I was single, and I had a 4-year-old child and no mom. And we just got in a car and we just drove. I'd never been west of the Mississippi. I'd never flown on an airplane.
That's a long car ride with a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
A long car ride.
My sister kept him until I got there, and they flew him.
Oh, okay, cool. I was like, 4-year-olds don't shut up. That's a long car ride. I love that.
Just out there and stood in the unemployment line. I mean, it was tough. It was and it's very funny because if you think about it, I went out there in 1981, November of 81, but by 1984, I think it was 84, I had a movie called Scalps playing in movie theaters across the United States, and it hit Variety's top grossing films list, 50 top grossing films list.
And yours is a quick.
That was pretty fast. I was pretty fast.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And, I always said I went from the unemployment line to the Emmys, and I did, and it's.
But it's your fate. I guess that's how it happens sometimes.
It's funny. It's and I tell people this story, and it's absolutely true. I used to stand back then. You couldn't do it online. There was no online. You had to actually stand physically in the unemployment line in the building on Magnolia Avenue at Lancashire. And you had to stand in the walk of shame, I used to call it. You had to stand there with your paper and stand in line at the unemployment line with my little boy. And I looked over the shoulder of the guy in front of me, and it was Wyatt Ordung, the guy who had made Robot Monster.
Oh.
He was an old man now, so young. And I looked and I said, "Oh my God, it's Wyatt Ordung." And I knew I was in Hollywood finally. And I thought, "Oh God, I want to say something to him." But I thought, you know what? Maybe he's as embarrassed standing in this line as I was. I said, "Fred, maybe you better let this one go." And I stayed my hand and I did not tap him on the shoulder. But they tore that unemployment building down at Magnolia and Lancashire. and they erected the Television Academy there. The same
Wow.
Television Academy that would hand me an Emmy.
How symbolic is that?
And I said, there you go, from the unemployment line to the Emmys, and that Emmy's sitting out there on
That's
the
amazing.
That's a great story.
door. So everyone who walks in this house can see that Emmy sitting there. Plus the other 2 Emmy nominations that I got that I didn't win. They send you a plaque, and those plaques are hanging.
Incredible.
Mm.
Quite the story.
I'll
These
go.
are we love to hear.
Oh, it can happen. You can go from riding the bus with a 4-year-old child to the unemployment office.
You absolutely can. Rick and I always say it's the people who give up that don't make it. You just got to keep going.
Yes. Yeah.
What a beautiful story, though. And like I said, we have a lot of writers, directors, producers, actors, people that are just starting off, to people who've been doing this for 20 to 40 years, who just like to come on and hear this. And it's so inspiring, and it does make it tangible for everybody who's out there busting their ass and really trying to do something that's in them that they have no choice but to chase, because they have that instinct for a reason, just like you did. So that's an incredible story, and thank you for sharing that.
I didn't have a desk. I had a plastic briefcase that sat on my lap and a manual typewriter. And I sat the briefcase on my lap, and I didn't have a bed. I had a bed, but I didn't have a frame. I had 4 cinder blocks, and the bed sat on the 4 cinder blocks. And I didn't have a bed for my kid to sleep on. I bought a love seat at a yard sale and dragged it up to my 1-bedroom apartment. My son slept in the same bedroom I did, on a love seat that I bought at a yard sale, and the bed was on 4 cinder blocks. And I sat on the bed with a plastic briefcase on my lap, and I typed the script to scalps. I said I would make the cheapest low-budget movie I could think of, and it was 6 kids, a station wagon, and a tent. That it can't get any cheaper than this. And it was for $15,000. But
which back then was quite a bit of money, because people are still making micro budget films on $15,000.
Well, this was shot on film.
Oh, yeah.
It was shot on film and blown up to 35 millimeter, and it played in theaters. And Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert reviewed it on sneak previews.
Wow.
It was their dog of the week. They said it looked like it had been edited with a tomahawk, and it made their little dog Sparky toss his Alpo. And my mother saw this review, and
I put that on a T-shirt.
Prouder. And there was ads in the local newspapers, and I thought, you know what? I'm standing at a factory machine. I was running a machine in a factory. And I had a movie playing in the theater down the road. And I thought,
isn't that how it goes, though?
How could this possibly be that I'm standing here? And at that time, with a little boy by myself, I was making $7 an hour at a factory machine. And down the road, I had a movie playing in a movie theater. And I'm standing there having to make $7 an hour and eating hamburger helper without the hamburger in it. And I said, it's not right about this scenario.
Would you say that you fed that dream with instinct?
You know, all I could think of is to just keep going.
I think that is instinct.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I kind of understood the big picture, because people say, well, it's got to play, and then the money's got to come in, and then it's
you knew the process.
You know, and you knew you had to have that paycheck, you know. And all you were thinking about is, how can I turn the fact that I got a movie playing in a theater and there's ads in the paper, how can I turn that into my next film? I wasn't really thinking that I was going to make any money off of scalps. I was thinking, how could I turn that into another movie, that maybe that movie would make a difference, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I made Biohazard. The guy I worked for at the machine said he would cover the lab costs of the laboratory costs, and that's what saved me, because the other people who were investing in the film bailed on me and disappeared. The only thing that saved me was that I had the negative of everything I'd shot. And that made all the difference. So I was then able to go find somebody to put the rest of the money up. And that was 35 millimeter. And that went out, and I ran into an Israeli company who had because they had a Belgian VHS cover. And I ran into them and I went, "Oh, you put you had the Belgian rights?" And they said, "Yes." They said, "How much did this movie cost you to make?" I said, $60,000. They said, "We paid more than that for Belgian." I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, I got this idea." And they said, "How much?" I said, $185,000. They said, "Okay, but make a good movie." I said, "Oh, I will." And they gave me $185,000.
I know how to do it on 15, so watch this.
I got $5,000. I made their movie, and they made $3 million. And my life changed forever. It was the first time anyone ever paid me to direct, and they paid me $15,000 to direct The Tomb, which was twice as much as my yearly income standing in the factory. And from that moment on, I've never done anything but direct films my entire life. And that was 1985. I've been a director my entire life since then. I've never done anything else.
Over 150 films, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I stopped. I just look at the IMDb, which is not accurate, but I look at that as a gauge.
It's pretty impressive, Fred. I will say so. And that's something that I can attest to for Rick and I, because we're known for our low budget, micro budget films. And we're just so lucky that we have access to actors and crew who are so collaborative. And if it's a good story and it's a good project, they'll come in and we'll pull favors. We like to take care of everybody. Everybody's getting paid, but it's not always, what you want to pay them, but we're all kind of like all ships rise with the tides kind of mentality. So I can relate to that. Like when you can make a movie on $5,000 and $15,000 and $40,000, but then somebody throws you a chunk of 150, 250, like, can you make a good movie? It's like, yeah, I can make you a good movie for a fraction of this. So watch what we can do with that. It's just, then it becomes really fun, because then you can take what, and then you can expand on it. But I also think that when you're working on a micro budget fund, that's when you get creative, and that's when you really work hard to figure things out and make things happen that you might not would have thought of if you had the money to do it. And that's what Rick and I try to do.
Well, so much money. When you have that kind of money to spend, there's so much money that never makes it to the screen. That's the problem. Because you when you have that kind of money, you have to protect that money.
Yeah.
And post-production,
marketing.
You have to protect that money. And like people say, "Oh, do you have a permit?" Well, of course you do. You have to have a permit, because if you have 30 employees and all of this stuff going, a guy who comes and shuts you down, it costs so much to be shut. It costs you so much more to be shut down by the police.
Yeah.
And so when you have all of that on the line, you can't afford to be shut down. And then it becomes, "Oh, well, do you have a motorcycle cop?" Now, I'm glad to be out of Los Angeles. I hate filming in Los Angeles. It's one of the worst experiences that anybody, and Billy Butler and all the rest of the guys, Charlie Band, they'll all tell you the same thing. And we do film there when I have to. But there's so much money that you throw away that never makes it to the screen, that you really get fed up. You get fed up with it, and you think, "Oh, well, I got all this money." And you just look at and I go there and I look at all the waste, and you look at all the trucks and the permitting and the insurance and E&O, which E&O insurance, errors and omissions. It's a scam. And I always tell people this, because if you tell the truth on an E&O insurance policy, you'll never be sued. And if you tell a lie on an E&O insurance policy, the insurance policy is unenforceable. So it's a scam. Business to be in the film business is selling insurance policies, but you're required to have one. And so coming with money is, you have to then protect that money. So it's there's a certain amount of waste that you have to throw away, and I'm very opposed to that. Because you can't take risks that you can take in a lower budget film.
Correct.
workers' comp and stuff. A lot of low budget guys I know, I won't name them, but a lot of them are friends of mine. They go out and they film without workers' comp or liability insurance. If something was to happen,
We're very big on liability insurance. We try to do a lot of paperwork in that pre-production process. We try to get everybody to dot those I's and cross those T's. And, we really try to do our due diligence when it comes to protecting the production, protecting our brand, protecting ourselves, our family, our employees. You really have to make sure that you're doing your job. And that's a huge part of being a producer on the back end, even if it is indie. And you can't skip that process because if you do, you really could get hurt. So,
but LLC or a corp behind it, or because we'll open a new LLC on every single show.
Every film, you open up a new LLC. That's exactly right. Yes.
You don't cross them. You don't use the same LLC for two different producers if you're working for two different companies, which we do a lot of the time. You don't want to cross them up. There's a lot of business. It's not fun, and Rick and I don't like doing it. But Rick will tell you, I'm kind of a Nazi when it comes to the paperwork. I don't accept any. It's like, Doc, you signed this, and you signed in the wrong place, and I send it back, and it's like it's just got to be done a certain way. Maybe genius.
And then at the end of the day, you got to hand it over when you release it to distribution, anyways, because they're going to ask for it. So if it's not there, then you're screwed.
Yes, and it's the level of distribution, because now because I have funded. I don't make a lot of low level films myself because I'm spoiled. I've become.
Good for you. You earned that.
But I.
Your dues, Brian.
I have funded a lot of no budget films. I funded the Boggy Creek series that's on Tubi, and I write that down. T.N.T. Jackson, this series, I funded that, and I funded the Amityville Death House. And
I did see that mentioned. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I funded Zombie Pirates for Steve Sessions. I've given money to the micro budget filmmakers, people that I thought could be who had promise and whose films I liked, that I wanted to elevate. I thought if I just helped them a little bit and put my hand on their shoulder, not too much, but a little bit. And I've, like if the thing came in, I would then hire maybe one of my editors to go through and brush up the work a little bit.
Oh, that's really cool.
And you know what I mean? And then, I would hire a professional colorist to recolor their films and redo the titles or whatever it is I could do. To
enhance it,
But people would come in and they would not have their soundtracks in order. And I said, you're making it very difficult for us to create an M&E track. And they'd go, well, what's that? And I said, well, this is where you and me are different. Because I grew up in a world where a music and effects track was mandatory. Because there were back in the day, necessary to have a German track or a French track where they dub your film into another language.
Right.
And to do that, you had to have a very clean track that if you turned the dialogue off, the film would play just as it played normally, just without dialogue. And they would just, do the German track. And I get a lot of business out of Germany now of my older library because I can produce a German track. And then you bring in one of these sort of guys and they bring you in, and their dialogue is mixed down into their effects, and their music mixed up into their dialogue, and the tracks are everywhere. And they're not trained. A lot of the people who work in the micro budget levels have not been trained properly, or they haven't been given good advice or how films should be delivered and what. And and I'll tell you this, and I don't give a lot of advice to people because they don't want to hear it. People are still taking stock shots that are 29.98 and dropping them into a timeline that's 23.98, and they're stuttery. And they don't seem to notice that, and they deliver a film with a shot that's stuttery. I saw it just 2 nights ago in a film by a guy who I admire, And I looked right at it and I said, well, here's another case of a 29.98 frame stock shot being dropped into a 24 frame timeline. I don't know if this bores you, but
No, I love this stuff.
We're so into it. I'm like, can we call you later, Fred?
and you
An hour's not going to be long enough tonight.
can convert 29.98 stock shot to 23.98. You just can't drop it in. Every fifth frame is a repeat frame, and it stutters, and you're
I don't know if that will ruin a film, but if the sound isn't good on a film, it does ruin it. It's distracting, you know?
Yes.
It's very distracting, and you don't want to, throw too much shade on it, because most of these are micro and low budget and they're doing their best, but a little bit of knowledge behind it can really save you. So this is exactly what people listening need to hear.
Look at Mary. Mary says the viewers are loving it.
And on TNT Jackson. And I said, they don't even match. I said, it doesn't have to. It's mental. It's psychological. When someone's running and you don't hear their footsteps.
Yes, they take out the natural Foley.
I took the Foley steps and I just dropped them in. I didn't even care if you just heard them, you saw it, and you bought it.
I have a nightmare story. We just got a film back. I'm not going to say which one it was, and that's why it's taking a little longer to get done. But we hired somebody and to do the sound design, and they literally pulled out the natural Foley. Like I got it back. They had it for way too long, by the way. I got it back, and you'd see a door close, and I didn't hear it. And you'd see footsteps, and I didn't hear it. And I said, oh my gosh, they pulled out all the natural Foley. I lost my mind. But it happens. You give your film to the wrong person. This kind of nightmare stuff.
I tell you, take it out.
From it.
Just drop it down into the effects track if you want to.
Yes.
Car doors closing and all that stuff. And I tell them, take room tone if you need to. Take a room tone, put it in there. If you need to cover where things are dropping in and out, just get a room tone that's just a little more powerful, like an air conditioner, and drop it down there that runs through the whole scene and level it all out.
Our director and editor ended up coming back and saving us by doing it and returning all the Foley to its natural habitat. But my God, I was blown away. Like, you're not getting paid, homie. Like you ruined it.
We're in sound right now on the movie that we did in Mississippi. And they sent me this thing saying, the lead guy has 31 lines of ADR, and we want to mix on Friday, and nobody can find him.
He's MIA.
I think we didn't find him. I think he's doing it tomorrow. We did a very unusual movie in Mississippi. It was the first film I did with Andrew Stevens since we all were in the Royal Oaks Phoenician days. Those were the days when we were making Boondock Saints.
Ooh.
And that was a company where we were doing vanity movies with Diane Keaton and Jack Nicholson, and we made a lot of interesting movies. We were doing co-productions with Roger Corman, and I went to India for 2.5 months. I lived in India making a karate movie with Don the Dragon Wilson, and but I hadn't worked with Andrew in a long time. He was an actor, son of Stella Stevens. And he was one of those Teen Tiger Beat teen idols. And he was a producer, but he had previously been an actor. And he was in a lot of my films to, keep up his SAG status every year. We hadn't worked together in a long time, but we made one of the most unusual films in my whole life last September called 100 Dates in Dallas. And it was sort of a John Waters version of Love American Style about a guy going back into the dating pool after being married for 17 years and all the unusual women that he met in Dallas after being out of the dating system. And this was a true story. These were the women that Andrew had dated, and this were verbatim. And they were so insane that we were so worried about the movement because we portrayed these women and they were insane. But I can't wait for people to see it. We worried about putting our own names on it. And we had a phone meeting the other day. Andrew said, do you want to put your name on this? And I said, because we talked about faking ourselves as two new filmmaking brothers, like the Coen brothers. We were going to put fake. I said, no, I said, I'm going to put my name on it.
You're not mentioning any real names, you know?
No, I said, but being that this is Andrew's real true story, they're going to know who they are. But it's going to be
I
great.
don't know who they are, but nobody else, because there were no names mentioned anybody. So
I'm afraid that it might impact my Christmas movie career because I've had quite a career in Christmas movies. And I just made another one, which I just started watching the first cut today, called A Royal Christmas Tale. And it's dealing with rescue animals getting dogs adopted from SPCA.
Mm.
And that follows up my movie from last year, which was A Royal Christmas Ballet, where I created my own ballet.
Wow.
Oh, that was something. I mean, I had to start from scratch. I had to hire a ballet company and stage a ballet, and it was quite beautiful. And I think that's what all the reviews talked about, how elegant and beautiful the ballet was. And so,
and what an opportunity for that ballet company that you gave them to not only create something original, but be a part of a film.
Well, most of the ballerinas were like 14-year-olds. When you go to a ballet school, you'll find that most of the girls in the ballet schools are children.
I went to ballet school, yes.
I'll tell you something, that is nothing to laugh at. These girls were outstanding, and I felt terrible because
it's militant.
At first I thought, well, they do a ballet. I mean, these things are an hour or so, but they did the same. Obviously, they did a 7-minute bit from Cinderella, which is what I selected, but they did the same movement multiple times because of all the cameras and stuff and the angles of behind them and in front of them and then on the floor and their toes and all that. And they were exhausted by the time.
And if they're 14, they've already spent more than half their life training in a studio 6 days a week. I guarantee you that.
Well, one little girl, unfortunately, her toes started to bleed, which I felt absolutely terrible about.
That's normal.
But later on their site, I saw the photo of them in their little outfits, and they were all holding up their paychecks.
Oh.
Yeah.
And they were wonderful.
14 is a cool age too, because you really have been doing it for more than half your life. You've probably been doing it with half of the girls that you're with at that point. But to be able to take that and then incorporate it with film, you're a teenager at that point, so you know who you are, what you're doing, the magnitude of the progress that you've made. So I imagine them giving themselves a pat on their own back for accomplishing something so cool, is to be in an original ballet in a Christmas film. Like, that's a little girl's dream come true. That's so cool.
Well, the year before, I staged an ice capade.
Of course you did, Fred.
Royal Christmas on Ice.
What'd you do the Christmas before that?
You can see Royal Christmas on Ice on Tubi. And people go, how do you go from Hollywood chainsaw hookers and Bad Girls from Mars to a Royal Christmas on Ice?
There's so many layers to that onion. Christmas and the pre-show.
Well, and I created and produced, directed, and wrote all 3 seasons of The Lair, which was a gay vampire TV series.
Yes.
For Here TV. And because they were very PR oriented, I did interviews with, of course, The Advocate. And I did an interview with anybody that they brought to me. So I did Unzipped, which I would never know what Unzipped was if I hadn't done the interview with them. And I did all of these interviews. And of course, everyone would always say, oh, well, are you gay? Or one guy said, are you queer? And I went, well, no, I'm not.
Listen to erotic thrillers.
And people said, well, how can you be doing this? And I said, well, I'm a storyteller. I tell stories with a camera. I said, and I'm friends with Sam Irvin, who is also a very good director who happens to be gay. And I was the supervising producer of Sam's miniseries, Dante's Cove, which was a gay series set in Hawaii. And I won't say I just did it because it was 2.5 months in Hawaii every year. But,
how many seasons? You said every year. How long did this go on for?
A couple years. Tracy Scott was the star. But I said, no one ever asked Sam how he directs a regular movie, and he's gay.
There you go.
Nobody ever ran that flag up the pole.
Good point.
But the Lair was very gay, and if you watched it, you might wonder how I happened to be at the helm. But I said, you know what? I tell a story with a camera. That's my job, and that's how you go from Bad Girls from Mars to A Royal Christmas on Ice. I mean, I'm not stuck in a rut. I don't see myself as a person who can only do one thing, and that's how everybody should be.
Right.
You got to be somebody. You can't be somebody who can only tell a zombie story.
Multi-dimensional, always evolving.
That's right. You're there to tell a story with a camera. That's your tool to tell the story, whatever your story may be. Your story may be about some young black kid who gets into trouble, and finds a way to straighten himself out before he goes to prison. Your story may be about young gay vampires who are trying to find their way in the world. Or about a person who wants to win an ice capade at Christmas time. Your thing is to take the camera. It's a tool. It's to tell a story with a camera.
And that just showcases your range and your abilities as a director, same as giving one actor who might be typecast different roles, allowing them to show their range. It's the same thing. It's just on the other side of the camera.
Right. And I went into this business when I did Biohazard and Star Slammer, which was Women's Prison in Outer Space. And I went in thinking, oh man, I'm going to do horror movies and sci-fi movies. And the first thing you learn is you're not going to be able to pay the rent if you pigeonhole yourself and you say, well, I'm not going to direct anything until somebody brings me another horror film. Soon as The Tomb was over, Moishe Diamond at Transworld, he hated it. It saved the company. It made him $3 million, and it saved them from going bankrupt. But he hated it because he said I injected a stupid sense of humor, and he didn't appreciate it. But the other partner, Cinetel Films, they looked at it and they went, hey, that was pretty good for $185,000. So they came and they said, hey, you want to make an action film? Well, I never saw myself as an action film guy. Never made an action film. But I said, sure. Is that another $15,000 job? They said, yes. Well, I got a 4-year-old kid at home. He wants to know when dinner time's coming around. So I said, okay. So they said, okay, we'll make one. We'll spend $500,000 this time, $500,000. I went, oh, that's an improvement over $185,000. Well, now along comes Columbia TriStar Pictures. And they said, we'll give you this amount of money for the home video rights if you play it off in theaters. And Cinetel said, oh, yeah, okay. They said, but we want David Carradine as the star. So they went, oh, okay. Well, he wants $250,000. Well, up goes the budget. But I'm still the director, right? Because I got a contract. And then Columbia TriStar says, well, we'll give you this amount of money, but we'd like Lee Van Cleef to play his father. Lee Van Cleef, $1,000. Up goes the budget. So it just keeps going and going. Next thing you know, I got $1 million in the budget, and I got a movie called Armed Response. And the next thing you know, they opened it in 100 theaters in New York City.
Wow.
Billboards on Sunset Boulevard. And I'm like, I'm still the director. So I get on an airplane for the first time in my life. I ain't never been on an airplane before. And I flew to New York City. And I saw my film open in 100 theaters in New York City. And I stayed at the Sheraton, Times Square, Sheraton Towers. And I had money. I had some money.
And you were smiling this big.
I made 2 movies in 1 year, $30,000. And I had never made but $7,000 in the whole year leading up to that. So.
And what year was this? Do you recall?
1985, 1986, I'd say.
So that's 4 to 5 years after you made the trip from Florida to LA. My God.
Yeah. So but see, I've been so poor for so long
Yeah.
I didn't know how to spend any of that money. So it was all in the bank. It was all in the bank. So
Nice for it to stay.
yeah. So come around 1988, I was still working for these guys, and I saw all the money they were making, and I thought, you know what? I'd like to have some of that for myself. So I looked in the bank, and by that time, I was down the road a little bit further, and I had $150,000-$160,000 in the bank because that kid from Florida, he didn't know how to spend any of it. So it was all sitting there. So I thought, oh man, I got enough money to make my own movie. So I went out and I made my own films. And that's the films I own today. And I still own Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers and Phantom Empire and Terminal Force and these movies that I made with the money that I earned working for these other people, because I never learned how to spend money on myself. You know, I was still, and to this day, I will go out to dinner and I'll have a nice dinner, but I'll look at a book that costs $30 at a horror convention, and I'll wring my hands over whether or not to buy it or not, because that in the back of my head, I still can't bring myself to spend $30 on a book because I grew up, you know, with no money. And that book could bring me pleasure for years, and I know it. But I can't, you know, I'll go back to my table there and sit behind my table, and I'll think about it. But I'll spend $100 that night over dinner. That's stupid, but that's the way it is.
Speaking of table, Brick told me recently, within the past few years, you were at Tampa Bay Screams. What year was that?
You know, they were nice enough. I've been there. I wasn't there this year, but I've been there probably the last 3 years.
We're gonna get you back. Let's get you back. You want to come out and hang out with the Junkies?
Well, earlier this year, I was too involved in my Buffalo movie. I went out to Buffalo and I made this dog adoption movie, and it was too complicated because you got to go out there while it's snowing. They want you to stand there while it's 10 degrees.
Which for a Florida boy, you know.
Yeah, I got to go out there and stand there while you're freezing your butt off to get those snow scenes. You know, you got to be authentic. So there was a January one, and that just that conflicted with.
Yeah, that was in January. Well, they just announced they're working on their next one. They don't have a location and a date yet because they're still pinning down that location. But yeah, you should definitely come out. The Junkies are going to be there, and we love Tampa Bay Screams. We love everything they represent in the Tampa Bay area. So we're big supporters of them, and they're supporters of us. So come on out, everybody.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed myself there, and Brink was out there. JR was out there once, and
Rick, you've worked with Brink.
Oh yeah, I love Brink to death.
Brink's my, as you know, Brink's my ex-girlfriend. So yeah, I worked.
Another fun fact, Junkies.
No,
I've heard that.
That's not a secret. That's not a bit of a secret. But I made a lot of movies with her, and I made a lot of movies with a lot of people. You know,
Michelle Bauer.
Michelle.
Linnea Quigley.
I worked with who?
Linnea Quigley.
You know, it's funny. After all these years, the only film I ever did with Linnea was Hollywood Chainsaw. I hired her for Jack-O-Lantern that Steve Latshaw directed, that I produced, so that we could be on the Phil Donahue show. That's the only reason Jack-O-Lantern was produced, was that Phil Donahue told me he would give me an hour, the entire hour episode, if I had a horror film that they could put a girl off the streets of New York in. And I didn't have a film, but I wanted the hour. I wanted the hour of publicity. So because I said, this is fantastic. So I said, yes, I do have a film, and and then I went there and auditioned girls off the street, and I gave one of them a part, and they sent her down there, and she was killed in Jack-O-Lantern. And then I went back, and it was a great promotion. Barbara Feldon from Get Smart and myself and Joe Bob Briggs were judges, and I directed these 5 girls through these horror scenes, and then Barbara and Joe Bob and me, we judged them, and we picked this one girl, and she went down to Orlando where the film was made. Jack-o'-lantern was made in Orlando.
All right.
And she got killed, and then we edited her scene together real quickly, and then I went back and did a wrap-up with a Phil Donahue show, and that's exactly the reason that we made Jack-o'-lantern. But Jack-o'-lantern turned out to be a huge hit. It was a giant monster hit, and I could never have imagined the success of Jack-o'-lantern, Jacko as they call it.
I feel like that's the theme of your story, though, is that you never could imagine any of this. You literally left with your brother with less than $1,000 or $1,000 cash, and you just went off of instinct and went where you thought it could happen. And within 3 years, you made it happen, and you got that Emmy, and then you just kept going, you know. And then 5-6 years later, boom, you have $1 million budget film and a huge story to tell, you know.
You know, it's funny. I don't know exactly how to sum it up, and I used to say that there must be something that certain people have that defines that. I'm not sure what it is. And I will say that wanting to be a director and being the right person to be a director are two different things.
Sure. The difference between could ya and should ya.
Yes. And I used to go in and I would see a set, and we would have invested money in this set, and I couldn't leave without shooting a scene for some other movie that I didn't even know what we would be. I would have to go in and shoot something on that set before they tore it down. And I would go around and tell everybody, I'd pay you $50 if you show up after wrap tomorrow night. And I'd go home and I'd write 5 pages of something, and I'd film it. And in most cases, I would eventually make a movie with that scene in it. I only have two scenes that I ever shot on a set that I didn't finish and make a movie out of. I got 2, but the rest of them, I would do it. I've got a lot of films that have scenes in them that were shot separately, and then later the movie itself was made. And I had an Israeli producer named Alan Emil, and Alan said to me, and he wasn't trying to compliment me. I think he was trying to help me. He said, "Fred, you're the kind of guy who would be walking out of a cave with an armful of diamonds, and you would drop them all trying to pick up one last diamond." And I think he was trying to tell me that I should be satisfied with what I have, and that I was the type of person who was always trying to pick up one last diamond instead of being happy with the diamonds I have. Wow. And I actually think that does sort of describe me. But I also point to other directors whose career ended 20 years ago. And I'm still working. And Alan Emil hasn't produced a movie in 25 years.
And again, I think it goes back to instinct. It just does. It's what's the gift that you've been given that you know you got to do something with it. It's the gift that you've been giving to survive. That is your survival. Everybody has a gift inside of them that is their survival for their life. You either use it and figure it out or you don't. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you just got to figure it out, and you have to trust your instincts to get there. Rick, I know that you have some really important questions to ask tonight.
I just got really 2 questions because as we explained at the beginning, a lot of filmmakers, actors, actresses, and stuff watch the show. So we always try to give, and you've already been giving them a lot of great stories from the past. But Amy and I are both huge 80s horror junkies. We grew up in that era. That was our heyday. To this day, I still think the best horror movies ever were produced during the 80s. You've been through that, the 90s, everything up to now. What could you give us, or what could you tell us as filmmakers, the people watching and stuff, maybe the biggest differences were, whether it's good or bad, from making movies back in the 80s as compared to doing something today?
Well, there are 2 things that stand out to me. Is today is the lack of a proper market. When I always say, when I was a kid, but there was a foreign market. You know, it's like there was like you could sell to Italy, you could sell to France, you could sell to Germany. I mean, there was a group of little countries called the Benelux, which was Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, and they would sell together. And they called them the Benelux, but they were a quick sale. And all these foreign territories, it's all gone. You know, it used to be the U.S. was not your primary market. It was foreign. And I had a deal with Roger Corman to use stock footage from Eat My Dust, Grand Theft Auto, a couple of the other films, to make my own little car chase movie. And Roger's deal is that he wanted the foreign market and I could have the U.S. And I said, well, that's a shit deal, Roger, because the U.S. isn't worth anything. Everything's in the foreign. And I didn't want to make this deal because the foreign was everything. Now the foreign doesn't exist at all. That's where the independent guy could actually, that you could make your money. Now there's no foreign and the U.S. is still shit. So what are you going to do?
Wow.
And
it's money back.
Yeah, because I had a movie and it's probably 11 years old because it just came back to me. All the rights just came back to me and I can finally get back out into streaming. It's called After Midnight. I made it with Richard. I think I maybe have sent you the trailer. Had Richard Grieco and Tawny Katane, and it's Screen Actors Guild, it's Directors Guild, it's all the stuff you want. $60,000, made in 6 days. I just barely got out of that with my skin. Maybe $70,000 back. Now it's come back to me. But I put it into foreign distribution with a distributor that I knew and I trusted because I have a little weight in the business. You know what I'm saying? If you mess with me, I'll come get you. Everybody knows I'm not litigious, but when I do go, I go all the way. I take you all the way to the end of the court proceedings. I don't fool around. I don't threaten people. I take it all the way. So I gave it to somebody and I said, listen, I'm used to $2,500 deals, $3,500 deals. I'm not used to zero. And that's what foreign was. Foreign was zero deals. And then at that point, I realized that the foreign market had just disappeared. And that's what people had in the 80s. You had these foreign markets. If you don't notice, in the 80s, you saw Italian imports. They might be Road Warrior ripoffs. They might be Conan the Barbarian ripoffs or Terminator ripoffs, whatever. You'd see movies from the Philippines. They'd be women, in prison movies, or they're like, like the Chuck Norris movie, Missing in Action. You'd see Missing in Action ripoffs. But you'd see all these foreign dubbed movies coming to the United States. There was a wild market. Spanish horror films with Paul Naschy. You see all these things. You don't see anything like that. There is no market for their films here. The American public said, we don't want Spanish dubbed horror films or Italian dubbed horror films. There's no Japanese giant monster movies anymore. The U.S. says we don't want any dubbed foreign films. The foreign market doesn't want anything. DVD is dead. There's no DVD. You used to be able to make The Tomb. You make $3 million on a movie that went no further than VHS or DVD. I mean, made for DVD was a real thing.
Yep.
You could make the budget back on $1 million movie just going to DVD. There is no DVD market anymore. And if you don't go to Netflix, if you don't make it to HBO Max, if you're going to go to Tubi or Hulu or these places like that, well, Rick, you're in business with Bayview. I'm not going to ask you on the air how you're doing, but you might tell me. I mean, I'm in business with Bayview. I like those guys. But I don't know if I would try to get a whole budget of a movie back unless it's made for Tubi, and they guaranteed me an MG up front that literally, my son, Chris, I think he made a made-for-Tubi movie, Meth Gator. I think that's what it's called.
Hey, they shot that in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think he said he shot it in Claremont.
Mm-hmm.
And
I auditioned for Meth Gator, fun fact. My agent sent me audition for That's why I remember the name of it. Plus, I know I had some friends in that film.
Well, let me tell you something. They drove right to my house and stored all their gear in my garage.
Of course, why not? I was actually going to ask you with your journey, was your son a filmmaker as well? So you answered it.
A bunch of meth gator gear in my garage. I'm thinking of putting it out in a yard sale. How long
Let me know when you sell, because I'm going to that yard sale.
Well, it's a bunch of flags, and there's a few pancakes and stuff like that out there. You can have screw him. But you know, I don't, because right now I'm thinking of I want to make it my own little independent film. I want to go back one more time and do this one more time. And I'm thinking of crowdfunding, which I haven't done in 11 years. I did an art film, Spydora, and I'm thinking of crowdfunding a little bit, and then putting up the rest myself. And I'm also looking into, which I think people should start doing this. I've really been looking into iPhones. I've seen some amazing stuff with the iPhone and the Blackmagic app and the Kino Pro. And there's some pretty amazing stuff with that. I don't know if you guys have looked into that, but
I have looked into it some, and the iPhone is wonderful. There's movies being played theatrically now that were shot on the iPhone, but it's not just the iPhone. It's the software. It's also the lenses that you have to purchase for the iPhones. It's a lot of stuff purchase-wise that you have to. But I mean, it can be done. That's the beautiful technology.
The lens, you
can get a ProRes. You can get ProRes 422 HQ out.
Yep.
On the iPhone, on the 15 or the 16, and I'm kind of looking into that stuff. I'm playing around with it just a little bit now, but that's pretty interesting. Now I own here in Florida in my garage 2 Sony FS7s, 2 complete packages, and I went around to Tampa Screams, and I talked to a few DPs. No one was conversant with a professional camera there. And that's the other thing I'm going to tell you about. Everybody I've spoken to here locally, and I'm sure somebody's going to come up and say, Fred, you talked to the wrong person. But of all the people that I've talked to here locally, none of them are conversant with professional level cameras. They're all using SLRs and small handy cams. And I said, I'm looking for a person who's conversant with a Sony FS7 or something in that range, because I want someone to come set up my cameras and go through and organize all my shit.
We know some great DPs in the Central Florida area, so we're going to chat.
Absolutely. We'll chat with you offline for sure.
That's good.
And all right, 3, we do this every single time. Why is it time to go? Because we could do it for another hour. Thank you so much, Fred, for coming on the show. You have just poured out knowledge for everybody watching. We really could keep the conversation going. No, you didn't, Boris. When you said that, I'm like, no, we're like this, because this is the stuff that, gets us going, because it's relevant and it's important. And, if you're not going to hear it here, then where are you going to hear it? You got to go pay for a workshop online somewhere.
I know I got off on a rant, and I hope I didn't waste your time.
No, not at all. Look at the comments.
Loving the technical. I'm telling you, this is the audience that you're talking to: writers, directors, producers, executive producers. We're lucky enough to have this group of people that follow us and support us, but they're here for a reason, because we give people a platform to come on the show and to share and to showcase, and it just builds a community of not just networking, but knowledge. So no, thank you. Like, everything you said tonight was so relevant in your story. Come on and look at this. We're going to plug this right now, you guys. Where can everybody find this, and where can everybody find you?
Everybody, this tells you one step at a time how I went from working in Florida with nothing it goes through every step of how I went up the ladder. It's almost a how-to book.
That's so cool.
Where can they find that? On Amazon or something?
It's on Amazon, and it's cheap. At 300 and some odd pages, almost 100,000 words. It's way too long, but everybody tells me, and it's all 5-star reviews.
I'm buying mine tonight, Fred.
Do it. You hear that, filmmakers? Get you a book. Just like actors. We get our actors' books. We read, we study, Know what the heck you're doing, and hear it from the people who have done it. Thank you so much again for coming on. We really appreciate your time. We're going to send you backstage, but don't go anywhere, because we're going to say goodbye, and then we're going to give you a proper goodbye once we're done.
Okay. We'll be right back with you, Fred.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Sped by too quick.
We should have played the 2-hour one for that one because I knew we were going to get into a lot of technical stuff, and I love that stuff. And obviously, our fans that were watching today were looking for it too. So that's the kind of stuff that I love.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Junkies, for joining the show. Get your booties in theaters to see Screamboat this week. Hit up Rick in Tampa. Hit me up in Orlando. Get online and buy Fred's book at Amazon. It's your how-to just get it done when it comes to filmmaking and, taking a risk and figuring out how to work those instincts. But we will see you guys next week for another great show. Have a good night.
Sounds great.